story. My sincere apologies to all those evaluations I'm still behind on. I promise. I will do that. I promise.
I trust you will.
I know. One of the things that I wanted to do in talking today was first, because this is an award that Flo, as she said, sets up herself under her own criteria, felt the need to do a little research on Tigger and the Tigger Award, and so I went to the two folks that I believe, at least in their own minds, believe they know everything, and that's my kids. And I have no idea where they get that from. They gave me a little information about Tigger, and I thought it was just perfect to share. And it's very consistent with what Flo said, and I have a little bit of a connection to each of those items for you. The first one, and they didn't use this word, they were like, super happy. Tigger's always super happy. And I said, okay, enthusiasm. They said, Tigger is always bouncing. Bounces everywhere. And I said, you know what? I get that, literally and figuratively. Bouncing is perfect. And the other one they said is cheerful. Cheerful. Tigger is just cheerful, makes everyone around him happy. And I thought, you know, this is perfect. This is Kris. There is absolutely no question in my mind, and one of the things I wanted to do today, because I know it, people like Diane Schnabel, people who've been around Tracy Robles for a long time, know the contributions that you've made. I think just about everybody in this room who's known Kris for probably more than 10 minutes has had an opportunity to experience her personal touch. What I think people don't know is what Flo alluded to, and that's what she's contributed to this organization. And I'm going to say that because it's not the accomplishment of writing a policy or completing an activity. What Kris has done that is so amazing and unique is she's made this place what it is in terms of a good place to work. So when you sit back and you think about the PTO you get and you think about the generous things that happen in this organization and all the wonderful stuff that you go, I love working for Sutter Health. How many of you know that it was this woman, when she was the HR director, that set the tone for how we treat our employees, for what kinds of policies we have? She's the heart behind this organization, and I don't want anyone to ever forget it. It's amazing. But that's not where it stops. So we, fortunately, through some miracle, one day Kris was having a bad day, which I can't really imagine. Really,
it was an Eeyore day.
She had one Eeyore day, and she walked into her office, and I don't know if you remember telling me this story, but she walked into her office, and face down on her chair was a job description. Yes. And she picked it up, and it was the job description for the new position in our department, working for me, that we had just created. And we were thinking, where are we going to find somebody? We didn't want a lawyer. We wanted somebody who could actually, all due respect to all the lawyers in the room, put the heart into what we do in employment law, because it's so important. And Kris came upstairs, I think within a day or two, went home, talked to Tom, came back and said, I want this job. And I remember going to Nancy Posey and Mike Evans and said, Kris Kraus wants to apply for this job. And they both yelped and said, what a coup. What a coup to get Kris Kraus into this department. Oh my God. And we snatched her up and we never looked back. And the department benefited every day. And I'm going to tell you a story about the benefits of one of the things that Kris has done. I was a new lawyer, pretty new lawyer when I came to Sutter. And I was, I'd actually been through a couple of jury trials. Felt like I had a good sense of the law, good sense of how a jury would react. And I remember one of my first interactions with Kris. She and I shared an office. I think a lot of people remember, for probably a year and a half, 2 years, long time. We shared an office, and it was under the theory of Kris shadowing me. I now know better. I think perhaps Kris was there to help me and to guide me as I wanted to over-lawyer everything. So I wanted to send a letter to an employee, of course, written for the HR director to send, but that was very clear about all the things that we were allowed to do and all the ways we were allowed to do it and the citations that allowed us to do it. And Kris very kindly took a look at that letter and she said, would you mind if I just softened it? And I didn't really know what that meant until I got it back. And I thought, wow, now we have a letter that actually says all the things I needed to say legally, but it did it in such a respectful and kind and understandable and coherent way. And from that moment on, all of us, you know, we would say, we need Kris. I mean, everybody on the team would say, we need Kris to look at this. We need Kris to look at this. And I'll tell you, she became our earliest jury consultant. She was the person, and you know this, Jeff Owensby would call me on stuff. So we would have a case that was getting ready to go to trial. And I would say, you know, I think we're going to win this. I think we're going to win it. And he'd say, what does Kris say? I don't know, I haven't checked with her yet. I was like, why don't you check with Kris, and why don't we have a meeting? I'm like, okay, so I would sit down and I'd tell Kris a story. She would ask me some questions, and I'd say, so, did we treat him fairly? Did we do good? And she'd go, well, you know, I think I might have done this just a little bit different. I think I might have done this just a little bit different. And she said, you know, it could really look like we weren't doing the right thing, even though I know we meant to.
Yeah.
And I would stop and I'd look and I'd go, she's totally right. She's totally right. And we pay jury consultants gobs of money to help us do this, to help us figure out what matters to people and Kris has done this for us for years because she just understands it.
It was so fun.
And you are so good at it. She just knows. She just absolutely gets it. So there's no doubt that you brought the heart to this organization in terms of the things we enjoy today as employees. When she was the director, she set this organization up, and all of our affiliates have mirrored. And there have been people over the years that have said too generous, too much, too parental, and at the end of the day, that's not what anybody in this room or anybody who works for this company feels. We feel like it's a great place to work, and we know it's because of you. I feel like the employment work that we do, we have to struggle every day to do what you do, but we never forget it. I mean, we think about it. We're consciously, I mean, Jeff Frost says all the time, okay, how would Kris look at this? I mean, it's part of who you are and it's what you brought. And the personal side, I cannot begin to talk about without being emotional. I will tell two tiny little quick stories, and there are hundreds, and probably hundreds from everyone in the room, and I'm going to tell you just one thing that I thought was funny. So I looked up one of the things about Tigger. I looked it up online because I had to make sure my kids were right. And so I looked it up online, and it said one of the things that Tigger is known for is having this good sense of direction. And I thought, Kris actually has a really great sense of direction, and it reminded me of one of the tiny little things that Kris does thousands of things for all the time. And it's the smallest thing, but it made such a difference to me over the course of years. I have no sense of direction. I can't often find my way back to my office. I can't find my way to hotel rooms once I've left them, not at all. And so people would give me directions, and Kris would hear. Somebody would say, you need to go west, and then you're going to go for about 3 miles. And I would be in a state of absolute fear. And she would come in and she's like, this is what you do. You go down, there's a McDonald's on the corner, and you go left. And she goes, and you know that Starbucks that you go to sometimes? You're going to make a right. And she did this for me for 10 years. Every time she heard someone try to give me directions, I just stopped embarrassing myself and I waited. And sure enough, within 2 to 3 minutes, Kris would pop in and she's like, okay, here's how you really do it. And by the way, there's an easier way than that even. She was just, I mean, it's one of those tiny little things, but she did it every time. And then there's a lot of not tiny little things. And one of the most impactful moments for me was when Dylan was in the hospital. And she came by unrequested, and I was in a terrible state. And I didn't even have time to talk to her. We were getting reports back from doctors, all kinds of stuff, and she walked in with this bag. And it had food in it, and it had magazines in it, and it had a stuffed animal. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to be eating anytime soon because I don't feel like it. I can imagine looking at a magazine, and there's a stuffed animal, and my son's not awake, and how thoughtful of Kris. And within, I don't know, 2 days, We ate every bit of food in that bag. I found that I needed every bit of distraction from those magazines, and my son to this day sleeps with the little dog you got him. His name is Muffy. And that is Kris in a nutshell. Nobody asked her. In fact, even when she brought it, I didn't even think I needed it. She just always knows what to do, and that's the personal side of Kris. And the last thing I'm going to say, the other thing I learned about Tigger, in looking a little bit up on him, is Tigger's one of a kind. And although Tigger always talks about himself as Tiggers, in the plural, because he's humble, maybe there's other Tiggers, everything in the book and the literature says Tigger's one of a kind. And I think there is no question that Kris Krafts is one of a kind.